Sometimes when working with networks, we have to do a few, well, how should we say it, creative things. And sometimes those involve NAT. One situation would be conditional NAT, where normal NAT happens 24/7 except when the devices on the inside network are going to a specific IP address or a specific destination using a specific protocol. And auto NAT does not give us the controls to do that level of detail. Or if we have two internal servers, for example, an email server and a web server, but we want to make them both available behind a single public IP address, where the web server is reachable on port 80 and the email server is reachable on port 25. Once again, we can do that with port address translation, but we can't implement that using AutoNAT. Or in the event that we need specific rules that are placed either before or after the AutoNAT rules, the category of NAT that can implement all these features for us are referred to as manual NAT, where we go to the NAT rule base and we manually add those rules to the rule base. And if we do that, we can have conditional rules based on the destination and or protocol. We can also do port address translation, and we can specify that the single IP address, for example, even the external IP address of this gateway, based on the port the inbound traffic is coming in on, we could refer that to either the web server if it's coming in on port 80 or over to an email server if it's TCP port 25. And because they're manual rules, we can place them anywhere we want in the NAT rule base, which includes before or after, and we can also insert manual rules where we want them to happen priority-wise as part of the rule base. And here's an example in Smart Console of a manual NAT rule. So in Smart Console, we've selected security policies. Under access control, we've selected NAT. And here we have all of our automatic generated NAT rules. And this top rule, rule number 1, is a manual NAT rule. And the question may be asked, why is it in position number 1? And the answer is because that's where I placed it. We can place them anywhere we want to based on the priority value we want to give to them. So for rule number 1, it says traffic from anywhere if it's destined for the firewall 1 outside IP address. So if we hover over firewall 1 outside IP, it's the outside IP address of firewall 1. And if the original service, the destination port, is TCP port 80, regarding the source address, just leave the original source IP address intact, but translate the destination address over to the web server at 192.168.1.100 on the inside. And as far as the destination port, don't mess with that either. Just leave it the same. And this NAT policy should be applied on firewall 1. So users out on the internet, like Cheech and Chong, when they go out to the IP address of 67.83.0.111 on TCP port 80, it's going to be translated. The destination port is going to be translated to that of the web server at 192.168.1.100. Along with that, we'd also want to make sure that we had permissions in our access control policy that permitted that traffic. So if we peek over at the access control policy for a moment, I added a rule here as well that permits traffic. And that's half of the story. That's the outside user accessing our server, but we also want to make sure that that server can respond. So if we go back to look at our NAT rules again, for the reply traffic, I've got a rule here, an automatically generated rule for the web server. It has hide NAT configured for the outbound traffic. Effectively, the source IP address of the web server at 192.168.1.100 is going to be hidden. Let me make this a little bit bigger. I'll drag this over a little bit. It's going to be hidden or translated into the source IP address of the firewall 1's outside interface, which is 67.83.0.111, which, when that reply makes it back to Cheech or Chong or whoever made the original request, is the source IP address they were expecting to receive that reply from. In this nugget, we've identified that in addition to AutoNAT, which is pretty easy to set up, we can also use features like manual NAT, which give us the benefits of doing protocol and destination-specific network address translation. It also gives us the ability to have 2 or more servers hiding behind a single IP address and specifying the individual ports that should be associated with the DMZ or internal servers. And when we create manual NAT rules, we can place them before, from a priority perspective, before the AutoNAT rules. We can apply them at the end of the AutoNAT rules, and we can also wedge them strategically at the right location within our AutoNAT rules, which allows them to have the exact priority that we want for those NAT rules. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.